Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channels here, ladies and gentlemen here. Another March Madness video for you guys. Just kind of trying to pump these out pretty quickly just because obviously I want to get a lot of these videos out before March Madness actually starts. And I'm going to get this one out before the playing games even start, the 16 seed ones. But yeah, I just want to get these videos out for you just to help you guys out and entertain or inform you or whatever. This is probably going to be the last video I do on March Madness. That's like bracketology or whatever. I might do an update video or like see how things went after the tournament gets started or after it ends, but this is probably the last bracketology video. If you guys like this bracketology stuff or this college basketball or sports stuff in general, let me know. I can definitely do more of these videos. It's something I'm a big sports fan in general. But yeah, just let me know that. And happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. I know I'm not wearing green. I don't have a lot of green stuff other than like a Celtic jersey. But yeah, is what it is. Happy St. Patrick's Day. But yeah, this video, we're going to be doing more of a not just predictions and filling out a whole bracket or anything, but more of a tips and tricks and like an analysis and breakdown of the brackets in particular games. Just for kind of for beginners, I guess, or people who want some tips on how to fill up a bracket pretty well and stuff like that. As well as just analyzing some of the games and some of this particular year's brackets, kind of, quirks, I guess you could say, a little more in depth than I did in my last video, where it's just filling out bracket pick by pick, team by team and everything. So yeah, that's kind of where we're going here. And I kind of wanted to go down the tips and tricks part first here, and kind of give you some tips on how to, I guess, strategically, if you want to, be dramatic about it, fill out a bracket here to kind of win. And this is particularly important if you're in a I guess a big bracket pool that you want to win for work or one of those like big, Capital One bracket pools and stuff that you want to win. And how to make a bracket that, historically speaking, analytically speaking, is set up to do well as help distinguish you from the crowd, get you points where others might not, and help you elevate you into that top percentile that you want to get into here. So yeah, not necessarily going to focus on any particular games from this year. Use some as examples, of course, but this is information and kind of picking advice that can really be applied to every year's bracket. So it's not necessarily tied to 2025's March Madness here. And yeah, let's get started with as far as picking advice here with everybody's favorite for March Madness because of the chaos of everything, upsets. How do you pick upsets? What upsets do you look for? Again, I'm not going to be using particular games and teams from this bracket necessarily, only as examples, but more so looking at the seed lines and the matchups there that you want to be looking at in general for March Madness here. And I scroll down a little bit just to get in perspective here. Let's start it off here with, the probably the safest upset picks you can take here at the 7-10 line over here. Jeez. Um, 7-10 by a lot of people is barely considered an upset. It is more so than like an 8-9 game, an upset, because the nines actually, I believe, historically speaking, have won over 50% of the games, so it's hardly an upset if the higher seed generally wins, honestly. But the 7-10 is where the upsets begin here, and this is probably the safest upset picks you can make here. These are two teams that have a 3 seed differential there, but generally fairly closely matched here. These are generally teams from kind of one team is kind of like a fringe kind of Power Five conference team going up against a better mid-major team. Generally, is what it is. But yeah, 10 seeds frequently upset 7 seeds. There's never real, or I'm sure there has been, but generally speaking, there's not one year where all 7 seed or all 10 seeds wins. But generally, when you're picking upsets, you look at the 7-10 line. You want to generally split it between 2 and 2 is generally a good rule for these because again, these are kind of coin tossy upsets here. You generally want to have 10 seeds and seven. So when it comes to this, 2 and 2, 2 7 seeds and 2 7 or 10 seeds went in here. For this bracket, obviously, if you watch my video on my full lineup here, I believe I did 2 and 2 actually with New Mexico, St. Mary's, Utah State, and Kansas. That's generally how it plays out. That's generally what we want to do here. Going on some more, realistic. I don't want to say realistic upsets, but some more clear-cut upsets to the point where, these are definitely like pretty, clear-cut upsets. Like these teams are much higher seeds. really in the middle here, I know you can't really see my hand or I'm like not miming out, but if you follow my cursor in the middle here, right in the middle of all these different regions is where you want to look. Your 5-12 games, your 4-13 games, and your 6-11 games. These are the bread and butter when it comes to picking upset games in March Madness. For those of you who are kind of new to this or old, or getting back into it, these three games, these three seed lines, are where you want to be focusing most when you're picking upsets in general. Um, you want to be focused on these seed lines. Generally speaking, with these, with the 4, 5, and 6 seeds, the lower seeds here, the favored teams, or whatever, these are generally again Power 5 schools, but they're schools in the Power 5 conferences that are kind of towards the bottom of those conferences or the middle of the pack of these teams. They're generally missing pieces here. They're not the most complete or talented teams, maybe dealing with some injuries. Teams that throughout the year obviously didn't finish at the top of their conferences, generally speaking. There's some exceptions, or kind of were flaky and kind of weird and weren't the best throughout the year and weren't super convincing and just clear cut dominant like the top three seeds were. So as a result, they're generally considered more susceptible to upsets. Of course, you look at this, you have a 5 seed here that won the Big Ten, a Power 5 conference tournament. It's a kind of a questionable seeded line for them, so that's kind of a valid thing there. But yeah, that's generally what you get with a lot of these. That's why they're considered more, valuable upsets, I guess. But generally speaking, at this seed line, and I'm not just talking about one particular region here, but through all 4 regions, when you look at those seed lines, you generally at least want to have one of each. You want to at least have one, maybe two, 4v13s, 5v12s, and especially 6v11s that you want to pick for upsets there. The general rule behind that is almost virtually every year, a few, maybe a handful of these upsets happen every year. And while it is somewhat hard to predict sometimes which one is going to hit, sometimes the popular upsets get smashed, which happens a lot more than you'd actually think. You want to pick a few of these, maybe like one or two 5-12, 6-11s, maybe one 4-13. That's generally a pretty good rule for picking there. So for that seed line, that's what I'd recommend. Going down to some of the more ballsy, I guess you could say, upset picks. Do you want to pick a 1v16? Do you want to pick a 2v15? Do you want to pick a 3v14? Let's just get the obvious out of the way here with the 1v16. Um, Historically speaking, this is one of the worst ideas you can do. Yes, it is like, oh, well, if they do win, I get a point that nobody else got. But for in general, the risk isn't really there for the reward. Getting one very unlikely point over everybody isn't that impactful, generally speaking, as well as the fact that it is almost guaranteed not to happen. One seeds are one seeds for a reason. And unless there's some catastrophic injuries or just some wild events, that 1v16 seed upset is almost impossible to predict. That way, that's why in general you want to completely ignore the 1v16. Historically speaking, it almost has never happened. Of course, in recency bias, it has happened a little more frequently for some reason in the last 10 years or something, like 2 of them, not including this one since they haven't been played obviously, have been upsets with Virginia and UMBC as well as Purdue and was it fairly was it FIU? I can't remember. Sorry for them. I know they're a big, upset school, but still, you generally just want to completely avoid this. It has happened before. It can theoretically happen, but it's almost impossible to predict. Going down to the 2 line here, 2v15s again. As go lower and lower in the seeds here, with the 1 to the 2 to the 3, more and more of these have historically happened. The chances get better, and it's easier to predict. But that's all, take that with a grain of salt because easier than almost impossible is virtually every. That's not a high bar to set, obviously. 2v15s again happens more frequently than the 1v15s. Historically speaking, has happened, a handful of times, sprinkled throughout the decades and everything. Recently, it seems like one of these upsets damn near happens every year, every other year. It seems like a 15 seed or a 1 seed has knocked somebody off virtually, on and off for every year. Back then, it's like a 15 seed, then a 16 seed, then a 15 seed, then a 16 seed. It's like generally this kind of has been happening a lot more recently for some whatever reason, whatever you want to attribute that to. But still, even with a 15 seed, that is a little more likely to happen. 2 seeds again, everything applies to them that essentially applies to the 1 seed. They're very good teams. predicting these kind of bad mid-major teams that haven't played anybody beat any of them incredibly difficulty, and it's essentially just like the one seeds playing Russian roulette, where there might not even be a chamber open for you. You might just be firing a loaded gun into your head, honestly. It's almost impossible to predict. Go back to any of the 15 seed upsets, no one would have thought those teams would have won. If they had to pick a 15 seed, most of the times they wouldn't have picked those. It's just complete Russian roulette with that. So it's best to just steer away and try to get the easy points with the 2 wins. Next, we go to the 3v14 line here. Again, this is the one where you might not get laughed out of the room necessarily if you kind of throw that idea out there. 3 seeds, again, they're very good teams generally speaking, but 3 seed is starting to get to the point on the seed line where maybe something is up with your team. Maybe you've been a little fluky throughout the season. Maybe you have an injury. You kind of stumble towards the end of your season, whatever the reason is. 3 seeds aren't untouchable, but they're very good teams, generally speaking. If the right matchup comes along where you think this is a very weak 3 seed or a very good 14 seed or one or the other or both, it's not the worst thing to throw in a 3v14 upset. These are generally easier to predict. These historically speaking, I'm sure, I don't know the exact number compared to the 15 seeds, but I'm sure it's a handful more 14 seeds as 1 versus 3 seeds. This is a bit of a safer upset to pick if you really want to make an out there pick. This is as far as I'd recommend going as far as making an actual pick for an actual bracket. This is the biggest upset I would actually put into a legit bracket. That being said, if you just take all 3 seeds, it's a pretty reasonable and pretty good play. So no one's gonna, look at you, weird for not having an upset on that line like the other 3 that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, that essentially covers all the upset picks and what to do and what not to do there for picking and helping you pick in the bracket. Let's move on from upset picking to something that's a little more kind of flown under the radar when it comes to um, you know picking advice for March Madness bracket, and that is whatever you want to call it, counter picking or fading or picking against really popular picks. That doesn't mean again to have Auburn losing in the first round because a lot of people have them winning or something as the #1 overall seed. That means like an 8v9 game, like Gonzaga and Georgia, where the vast majority of people are going to pick Georgia or pick Gonzaga as they believe them to be an underseeded or an underseeded team and analytically very good team. Picking Georgia, especially when it's only a 1 point difference there, because both of them are probably going to lose to Houston. Picking Georgia to get an extra point and have your bracket stand out is a very good pick there because Georgia, more than capable team on a very good conference, battle tested, can definitely knock off a Gonzaga. And if both teams are going to lose to Houston in your bracket anyways, you might as well pick the other team to try to distinguish your bracket and what is a slightly risky but a very plausible point that you can gain over a large bracket group. There is some risk involved in this strategy, of course. Of course, popular picks are popular for a reason. They're probably more likely to happen, and they're probably the favorites betting wise for a reason. But again, you want to distinguish yourself from the crowd if you really want to, get to the upper end. Again, being at the bottom of the bracket pool and being at the top of the bracket pool have one thing in common. You distinguish yourself quite a bit from the middle of the pack. Again, it's risk reward, but it's worth doing if you want to kind of go big or go home. 8v9 seed lines are very. If you're talking about just around the 64, 8v9 games are very very good for this. Generally speaking, one team is going to be heavily favored for whatever reason, like UConn or like Gonzaga, and picking against them with Oklahoma or Georgia in this example, or whatever team it may be that year, is a good pick. Same for the 7v10. It generally happens pretty often in those games as well, where one team is going to be a popular upset or hold strong pick there that you might want to pick against. As again, those are games that are kind of coin tosses, anyways. You can make a case for both teams. It's not a crazy risk to distinguish yourself and get some points over some people. Um, Past that, if you want to go talk about deeper into the tournaments here, you don't want a 1 seed knocked out in the first round, probably the second round either. But fading a very popular kind of tournament champion pick, not wanting to pick whoever the most popular is this year. From what it seemed like on ESPN Tournament Challenge, their analytics seem to suggest Duke is far and away the most popular pick for national champion because of how big of a brand they are, a very good team. They're a one seed, of course. Over 25% of brackets as of now in the ESPN Tournament Challenge app have Duke as the national champion. Duke, a big brand, and not a horrible play there, but if you really want to distinguish yourself from the crowd, there's other one seed and two seeds that are very plausible to win the national championship that don't put you into over a quarter of the brackets being the same. Lastly, again, going back to upsets a bit here, popular upset picks and what to do with them. You know what I mean. You turn on the CBS Sports, broadcast or whatever for Bracketology and March Madness. A good example here is usually it's in 5, 12, 4, 13, or 6, 11 rounds here of popular upset picks. UC San Diego, probably the most popular upset pick this year. There's always one or two teams every year that people are just huge on at the 12 line and the 13 line for the seed line there that are going to upset supposedly whoever everyone in the CBS Sports is having them as their big upset play to the point where it almost becomes, is the 12 seed the favorite in this game? Popular upset picks are pretty, in my opinion at least, pretty good to fade. I don't know the actual. I'm just pulling this out of my ass, but it seems like, from my, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? My personal bias view of it. Look throughout history, especially recent history, of the most popular or most picked upset teams, and tell me how many of them have actually hit. Last year, it was actually a team in the tournament this year. McNeese, where are they? The 12 seed here. McNeese was a very popular upset pick, fell flat on their face very hard. Another team, Drake Bulldogs, have been in the tournament a few years in a row now. Very popular upset picks usually, fell flat on their face basically every single time. So fading the most popular, or like one, two, or three most popular upset picks, generally speaking, isn't a horrible idea. At least the first one or two picks there, because more often than not, they do not hit. Think about a lot of the upsets you remember from March Madness, whether they're just first round or Cinderella runs. How many of them were, the most popular pick in America for upsets? How many of them were having a bunch of CBS Sports analysts take them? How many of them were very popular upset picks? Not a lot. That's why you want to generally stay away from whoever the most popular or the second most popular upset pick is. Again, this presents some challenges. These popular upset picks are popular for a reason. They have analytics and records showing that they might be favorable for upset potential. They have matchups that are maybe favorable for them as well. So it becomes hard once you stray from them to actually predict upsets. There's less analytics supporting it, there's less signs pointing to it, and it becomes somewhat of a game of Russian roulette when you pick some of these other upsets. Some of it is just a gut feeling. I'm not going to lie to you. Picking random upsets that aren't popular, like maybe High Point over Purdue, or picking, an Akron, that's kind of, or Liberty over Oregon, or picking a UNC Wilmington over Texas Tech, for example. These are upset picks and plays that you maybe want to look into. You might not even be able to justify them as much, speaking from records or analytics, but that's what makes good upset picks, in my opinion. The first two of most popular upset picks almost never work out. Occasionally they do, but a lot of times they fall on their face. So yeah, that kind of goes over kind of my tips and tricks for every year of picking brackets that can be applied to every year, not just 2025. Picking strategies, picking tips and advice there. What I want to kind of do at the second half and the end of this video here is kind of go over the 2025 bracket and go over some particular teams and games here that I found interesting that I might not have gone into as much depth in the last video, and kind of just analyze and do some bracket analogy or analysis of the 2025 bracket here, going region by region here. We'll start over in the South, of course. Games that I find interesting, not just necessarily upsets, but teams I find interesting as well. Generally, we're going to go back to this upset scenes here. Going to Michigan and San Diego State, or UC San Diego here. I like Michigan a lot here. This, again, the most popular upset in the bracket. I don't trust UC San Diego anymore for that reason. They do have some signs pointing to a possible upset, but I think Michigan coming out of the Big Ten championship, They're hot. They're bigger and more athletic than UC San Diego. I think they get by pretty easily. I think a Sweet 16 run is very possible for Michigan. Yale and Texas A&M here. Obviously, the Ivy League is always a big kind of problematic thing here when it comes to picking upsets with them. They're very historically speaking. That's another thing you want to look at is historically uh, how historically some of these teams and conferences perform. Like the Ivy League, who is known for some of their more ballsy upsets over the years, just because of some reason I don't know. Yale, in my opinion, another popular upset pick here that I don't think will hit, unfortunately. I like Texas A&M in this game. They're bigger, they're more athletic, they're more physical, they're more battle tested here. You could say that for virtually every upset team, but particularly with Texas A&M and Yale, the disparity is even bigger in my opinion here. This is not a good draw for Yale or UC San Diego. These are two teams I was interested in, but with the draws they got, just really aren't kind of adding up for me. Going to the 6-11, the playing game here. San Diego State's an okay team. Wouldn't really expect much from them if they got in. UNC, a popular brand. They're probably going to be a popular upset pick because some people, for whatever reason, are pretty down on Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to win this game, especially if San Diego State gets in. But even if North Carolina gets in, North Carolina shouldn't be in the tournament. They have virtually one, maybe zero quad one wins, quad one including Mississippi. I mean, it's just Mississippi's going to wipe the floor if we ever don't overthink it here. I know a lot of times one of the playing teams does well, but this playing year in particular was very weak. So if any year is going to break that trend, it's going to be this year. Another team to watch here, Iowa State. They are dealing with some injury issues that are definitely kind of putting a question mark on them. But I think their route, at least to the Elite Eight, where they would probably face Auburn, is very open and very plausible for them. Again, a physical team out of the Big 12, they're going to be good. Michigan State's probably a Sweet 16 bound team here. I would, again, when you speak of historically performing conferences, the Mountain West is one of the worst examples. A conference that's generally overhyped and underperforms type of deal. I'm just not a big fan of Marquette. You want us to talk about history? Shaka Smart, outside of his VCU run, has performed pretty poorly in the tournaments, getting upset quite a bit and underperforming in general. This is not a team and a coach you really want to back in March for the past while now. New Mexico got a great coach, or a good player, and the Mountain West guard or player of the year. New Mexico should be able to handedly win this. Next, let's go over to the East here. Some games and teams I'm interested in. Um, Starting here with Oregon. Oregon is if Liberty finds a way to beat Oregon, I mean, I might just have to hang up the cleats here. I'm probably going to have to hang up the cleats by saying that now and cursing the game. But Oregon is one of those teams. Again, you talk about the historical factor. Their coach in this organization does not get upset, does not lose in the first round of the tournament. They just don't. I mean, I think they're like what 8 of 8 in the last 8 years that they made it. Oregon does not win or not lose. They're a tough team out of the Big Ten. They're being slept on. Oregon with this 4 game kind of cluster here, or 4 team cluster here. Akron very plausible they come out, even if Arizona comes out, which I think they probably will over Akron. Unfortunately, a bad draw for them. Another upset team you probably don't want to take there. Oregon is a pretty clear path to the Sweet 16. And if Duke gets here, which in all likelihood they will, I could see Oregon knocking them off. It wouldn't surprise me that much. Oregon likes to make deep runs and big runs here in the tournament. It wouldn't surprise me. So watch out for Oregon for sure. Duke, a 1 seed, I'm not very sold on, despite them being the most favorite to win the tournament. Duke, out of very weak ACC, kind of banged up a little bit. Doesn't seem like their year, even if they get a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 run. Going down to the bottom half here, Wisconsin, another team to kind of fade, in my opinion. Not the biggest fan of the Grizzlies and how they've been playing, but I'm more of a hater of Wisconsin, and they don't play particularly great defense, and they can't score. A combination you just cannot have in the tournament. You go to BYU and VCU. BYU lives and dies by the three. They have a poor performance and underperforming with talented teams in the tournament. VCU coming out of a pretty good A10 run here and a good team. I would take VCU honestly to. I wouldn't hate you if you took. This is a coin toss of a game to me. Whoever wins this BYU VCU game is going to the Sweet 16, which makes it all the more sucky that you have to pick one of them. I would err on the side of history and pick VCU. They perform well in the conference, generally speaking, and I do not trust BYU. But whoever wins that game is going to the Sweet 16. So put them in the Sweet 16, whoever you have. Next, Alabama is being slept on because of their poor defense. But in my opinion, they have a pretty good road to at least the Elite Eight. This team and this like pro style elite offense is not going to be threatened by St. Mary's or Vandy. They're not going to be threatened by whoever comes out of this 4 game cluster of BYU, VCU, Montana, Wisconsin. They're going to be able to shoot all of them out of gym. Their only challenge really presented is either going to be Oregon or Duke, probably Duke. And I don't believe Duke is going to be able to keep up with them scoring wise. I think they're a very plausible Final Four choice there. Going into the West here, teams I'm interested in. Obviously, if you watch my video, Florida. Florida, in my opinion, are the national champions this year. They're the most complete team all around. The best resume, in my opinion, really. Are hot at the right time. I believe in that. I believe in you have to get hot and have to play good ball going into March. Everything's going their way. I'll touch on UConn lightly. A team a lot of people are picking to win this game, obviously, which probably is going to happen. A lot of people are considering putting them over Florida, given their back-to-back defending champions here. UConn will get knocked out by Florida. UConn has not shown me any reason that they can pull off some massive upset over a team like Florida. Going down into the more upset region here, Memphis is not going to win. Memphis is out of a very weak American conference. People are trying to hype these guys up like there's some underdogs being slept on. Colorado State's playing the hottest outside of maybe Florida. They're the hottest team in college basketball. They won the Mountain West. They're prime. They have, historically speaking, a pretty good resume in the tournament. Of at least giving the teams run for their fucking money. Memphis not impressive to me at all. I think this is a clear upset to me. Maryland kind of being slightly disrespected, especially since the Crab Five is not the deepest team in the league, as the nickname might tell. But Maryland's a very good team. This is, in my opinion, a very easy Sweet 16 run for them, given the path they have. Grand Canyon, they're a popular school. A lot of people like them, and I do too. But this is a bad draw. Won't be able to play with the elite talent of Maryland. Drake, another team a lot of people fucking like for whatever reason, as if they haven't fell on their face in the past 2 or 3 years in every upset pick they've had. Drake, with a team of the SEC that's as talented and physical and athletic as Missouri and dangerous as Missouri, they just have their work cut out. If they had an Illinois or something, I'd pick them probably, but Missouri is going to just outplay them. Past that, St. John's is a kind of a weak 2 seed here, in my opinion. People are hyping them up. I think just because of what they have here, probably a very plausible Sweet 16 run at least. But I just don't trust their offense. They're a very physical team, which I like, and I think they'll be fun to watch all the way through their run. But Texas Tech is probably going to come out of this lower half here just because of how elite their coaching and offense is, and still very disciplined and solid team. Going into the last region here with the Midwest, Houston being slept on a little bit here. A lot of people taking Gonzaga, or some, it's a little Georgia, but mainly Gonzaga to upset them. That is not going to happen. Houston will run either of these teams out of the gym. Their discipline, their offense and defense this year are great. They're playing good ball recently out of a tough Big 12 conference. It's just going to be Houston is going to dominate either of these teams. Don't buy into the Gonzaga analytics hype at all. Clemson and McNeese. I'm done with the McNeese Cowboys. I'm not really going to ride with them this year. Clemson, I'm not a fan of them at all, but I think they've just been given a very easy path to the Sweet 16 here. They have a little talent. They play well. They win games they're supposed to for the most part. I don't see McNeese threatening them. On the other hand, Purdue is overdue for an upset, meaning they had one good year. They will get upset probably. High Point, a very high octane offense. Wouldn't be too surprised if they could beat Clemson, but I think Clemson just gets another easier win to the Sweet 16 here. That's probably how it's going to play out. Next, with the play-in game here, I think Illinois will handle more than easily either of these teams. I'd say Texas probably. Xavier hasn't really done anything at all this year to impress me. They don't really have a very good resume. Surprised that they were even in at all. Texas, a little more battle-tested team and a little more talented of a team, like raw talent, but still. But Illinois should handle all of them. Kentucky, after the bad luck they've had for the past few years, they're due for a pretty deep run here. I wouldn't be surprised if they had an Elite Eight run out of this half of the region. UCLA, a very bad team in my opinion. Good defense, but can't really put up a ton of points to support it. Playing pretty poor ball in my opinion. Utah State again, Mountain West team, pretty wary of them, but I think Utah State's offense will be able to outscore UCLA here. Tennessee probably go there. That's probably what I kind of. Obviously, this isn't a full fill out here, but just a raw kind of analysis of some of the brackets for this year and their games. But yeah, that does it for this video here, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed my kind of analysis of this year's bracket as well as the tips and tricks. Hope you guys learned something or found that helpful at all. Let me know if you did. Let me know if you have any questions or if you have any of your own takes or thoughts or opinions. And yeah, can't thank you guys enough for the recent support here with the views and the subscribers and everything. We just cracked 70, I saw. So thank you guys a lot for that. It really means a lot. And yeah, just make sure to like and subscribe if you found this video on the channel entertaining or informative. And I'll see you guys in the next video.